Yo, what's good, y'all? The video Showtime Pretty Boy Bless me be back at it with another video. We about to react to the dumbest ways rappers ended in jail. Let's go, let's get it.
Fluffy eggs, sausage, and a crispy hash brown. It's how everyone should.
Rap music is known for two things: big spenders and a whole lot of crime. Sure, that doesn't mean all rappers are criminals. There are loads of rappers who are really great role models who've never even thought of committing even the slightest crime. But when a rapper does choose to do something terrible, it's always big news. These rappers lost everything by finding their way behind bars. Want to know how they got there? Then
Yeah.
keep watching. This is our list of rappers who are currently rotting in jail. Some of the names on this list will surprise you. Let's get to it. C Murder. This controversial case has been making headlines for years. C Murder is best known for his debut solo album, Life or Death, and his collaborations with Snoop Dogg. But his prison sentence is almost more famous than any of that now. It all started back in September 2003. Louisiana's Platinum Club was hosting a rap battle. A 16-year-old called Steve Thomas was taking part. But things went wrong when he stepped off the stage and allegedly accidentally bumped into one of C Murder's friends. This kicked off a huge fight between the kid and a group of older men, with 30-year-old C Murder at the center of it. According to testimonies given at the 2003 trial, the fight moved outside into the parking lot, where the teenager was beaten before C Murder shot him in the chest at point-blank range, killing him. C Murder was convicted. But then, things started getting complicated. The conviction was thrown out when it was revealed that the prosecutors on the case hid important information. C Murder was retrialed in 2009 and again found guilty. He was sentenced to life in prison.
Wow.
But the controversy didn't stop there. In 2018, two witnesses who were key to getting C Murder convicted came forward with some shocking information. One witness said police had coerced him into pointing to C Murder as the shooter, but he knew he was not the man holding the gun that night. Another witness, who had been working as part of the security team on the night of the murder, had an even more serious accusation. He claimed that the police had tricked him by arresting and detaining him until he agreed to testify against C Murder. But he said he was certain C Murder wasn't the man who shot that boy. So who did? Now, there's a big campaign to get C Murder out of prison and find the real killer. But right now, he's still in a cell. We'll just have to see what happens next, or if C Murder has to spend the rest of his life in prison for a crime he might not have committed. You think he did it? YNW Melly. YNW Melly was living the dream as a young rapper. He had started as part of the group YNW, along with his childhood friends, YNW Portland, YNW Sack Chaser, and YNW Juvie. Melly had been in trouble with the law a shocking number of times, considering his young age. It started in 2015 when he was just 16 years old. He had fired a gun at 3 students who were standing outside their school, apparently for no reason. There were no deaths this time, but even though Melly spent time in prison, the incident actually worked in his favor. While serving time, he wrote a song that was about to lead him down the road to stardom. It was called Murder on My Mind. When he got out, he posted the song online, and it got a lot of attention. Soon, he was collaborating with people like T Grizzly. But on October 26, 2018, tragedy struck the YNW group. Borland was behind the wheel with the others in the car when they became the victims of a drive-by shooting. At least, that's what Melly told everyone. Sack Chaser and Juvie were already dead when they arrived at the hospital, but Melly and Portland weren't even injured.
That's crazy.
Mine are so easy, it's black and white.
A month later, Melly shared a photo of him and Kanye West on his Instagram, leading to rumors that they were recording together. It was as if Melly was on a solo career now, maybe what he was wanting for a long time. But it wasn't going to last. Police were busy conducting forensic investigations into the drive-by that were about to prove it wasn't a drive-by at all. While this was happening, a clip went viral showing Melly hesitating as he tries to tell a journalist that he doesn't murder humans. In February 2019, Melly was arrested. This time, it was on a charge of murder. They had proof that Melly and Borland had staged the drive-by and had actually murdered their own friends in that car. Melly posted on social media that rumors and lies were being spread about him, but he deleted that post soon after. He's currently in jail without a chance of parole. There's no way he's getting off easy. Until recently, they were trying to sentence him to death, and they've only just decided to let him off with life in prison. 03 Greedo. 03 Greedo is known as one of the most inventive musicians in the rap world today. Unfortunately, he's being forced to work on all his new music from a prison cell. How'd he get there? In 2016, he was pulled over by the police. They claimed they smelled weed in the car, so as usual, they opened his trunk. That was pretty bad timing for 03 Greedo, who had 2 stolen guns and 4 pounds of meth in there. They came down insanely hard on him. They were looking to sentence him to a whopping 300 years in prison. So he took a plea deal and was sentenced to 20 years with the possibility of release after 5 years of good behavior. He started his sentence in 2018, but when the pandemic struck, his life in prison got even harder. They began putting prisoners who tested positive for COVID-19 into solitary to isolate them from the others. That's pretty tough. 03 Greedo said he had been writing lyrics to help him through the isolation, and he claims they're some of the best things he's ever written. So I guess, at least, he's putting a positive spin on his situation. Tay-K. Tay-K made a name for himself at just 17 years old when he released a music video for his song, The Race. It was surprisingly topical. It was actually recorded while he was on the run. The years before, he was part of a group that broke into a house in an attempted robbery. They weren't successful. They got away with nothing. But the group murdered 21-year-old Ethan Walker in the process and injured one other person. He was put under house arrest. But that didn't last. He soon broke his ankle bracelet and took off. That's when he was inspired to write his song, which would soon become a multi-platinum hit. The day he released the video, police caught up with him. But Tay-K now had even more problems than he had before. Texas law was after him now too, for another murder. This time, he'd shot 23-year-old photographer Mark Anthony Saldivar just so he can steal his camera equipment. It wasn't only the murder and robbery charges stacking up. He was also having lawsuits thrown at him from every angle. He was being sued for wrongful death by the photographer's mother and the parents of the men he shot in the botched robbery. He was also being sued by the man who was injured in the robbery and by a totally different couple who claimed Tay-K had assaulted them in a park back in 2017. He was also fined $21,000. I guess it didn't matter because he wouldn't need the cash anyway, because his prison time stacked up fast. He got 55 years for murder, 30 years for 1 robbery charge, and 2 13-year sentences for another 2 robbery charges. That's a total of 106 years in prison.
Wow.
G-Dep. On October 19, 1993, John Henkel was attacked on the corner of Park Avenue and 114th Street. It was a mugging that went wrong. John was shot 3 times in the chest before the mugger disappeared into the night. The crime left police stumped. They never worked out who the mysterious mugger was. Incredibly, almost 2 decades later, they got their answer. In 2010, G-Dep walked into the station. The rapper was a protege of Sean Combs back in the 90s and was now a family man with 2 young boys. Nobody had asked him to stop by the police station, but he had something to say that had been on his mind for a long time. He told police that when he was in his late teens, he'd shot a man on Park Avenue and 114th Street. The police started scouring old case files to figure out which crime G-Dep had just confessed to. Eventually, they found the cold case file on John Henkel. But they had some bad news for G-Dep. He hadn't just shot John, he'd killed him. All this time, G-Dep wasn't sure if the man he attacked had lived or died, but he sure knew now. He just confessed to murder. In a trial in 2012, he was sentenced to 15 years for the crime, the lowest sentence allowed by the law. Social media and his fellow inmates haven't been kind to him. He's been mocked by everyone for turning himself in when he literally got away with murder. But he said he wanted to get right with God. You've got to admire his courage. What do you think about G-Dep turning himself in? Do you think he did the right thing, or would you have kept it a secret? Suge Knight. Suge Knight might not be a rapper himself, but there's no doubt he's a big name in the rap world. He started out as a football player, appearing for the LA Rams in the 80s. After that, he switched to the music business. As the CEO of Death Row Records, he launched the career of some of the most iconic rappers of all time, including Snoop Dogg, Dr. Dre, and the legendary Tupac. But while he was doing that, he was consistently on the wrong side of the law. Usually, this involved assault convictions, and he'd follow those up by violating his parole. But in 2015, he took it way too far. Some witnesses came forward to tell a pretty terrifying story about what happened. According to them, an argument broke out between Knight and two men on the set of Straight Outta Compton. The men he was fighting with were Terry Carter, one of the founders of Heavyweight Records, and Terry's friend, Clay Sloan, a filmmaker. The witnesses said that Terry and his friend left the set, and soon after, Knight got in his car and followed them. What happened next was horrifying. While the two friends were walking through a restaurant parking lot, Knight drove straight for them, running over them, both. Terry was injured, but tragically, Clay was killed. Knight then took off in his car before the police had arrived at the scene, but he wasn't getting away that easily. The whole thing was captured on CCTV. Most people who were there seemed to think this was a pretty clear-cut case of murder, but their testimonies weren't enough. Knight was only charged with voluntary manslaughter. That doesn't mean he got off lightly. In 2018, he was sentenced to 28 years in prison for this horrific crime. That's 22 years for the hit and run, and another 6 years because it was his third strike. So he won't be getting out of jail anytime soon. Meanwhile, Snoop Dogg has bought Knight's Death Row Records, and apparently, he has big plans for it. Young QC. Young QC was still trying to make a name for himself as an aspiring rapper back in 2012. But he wanted to be a little more like the famous rappers he'd seen throwing money around like it grows on trees. He didn't really need it. His mom Yolanda was taking care of him. She spent all her money on him, even buying him a Ford Mustang. She loved him, especially since he was all she had. Young QC was her only child, and his dad had gone to prison for murder and arson decades ago. But all her love wasn't enough for him. Young QC wanted money, and he knew exactly how to get it. He hired a hitman who was actually his friend. He told this hitman to make sure his mom didn't live past Sunday.
Oh, damn,
And sure enough, Yolanda was found shot to death in her sleep, and the police went on a hunt for the killer. Not long after, Young QC attended the funeral of a murdered 15-year-old artist, supporting a movement against violence. He even mentioned his mom's murder, saying that she was killed just because someone wanted to steal from her. That was true, only nobody knew yet that the person trying to steal from her was Young QC himself. It wouldn't take long for people to work it out though. Remember, Young QC was an only child, meaning he wouldn't have to share his inheritance with anyone. And now, just a short time after his mom's murder, he was flashing his cash. He was buying luxury clothes, expensive shoes, and even flashy cars. He was posting all this on his Instagram too. But it was one video that really got him into hot water. When police saw a viral clip of Young QC throwing dollar bills into a small crowd after drawing the money out of an ATM, they put a case together and brought in Young QC and the hitman for questioning. They both knew their time was up, and they confessed to the murder of Yolanda. The people who knew her said her murder was a real tragedy. They said she was a kind and caring person who gave her son everything. They also said that Young QC behaved like a spoiled brat. It sure seems like they were right. The judge seemed to agree. Young QC was sentenced to a whopping 99 years in prison, while the hitman got 100 years. I hope Young QC enjoyed his time as a rich rapper while he had it, because that ship has sailed. Big Lurch. Big Lurch was well known in the Bay Area and New Orleans as a member of Cosmic Slop Shop. He started writing poetry at the age of only 7 before deciding to go into rap. His career was looking pretty good, and he was signed to Black Market Records. But one night, it went so badly wrong that there's literally no climbing back out of this hole. Big Lurch was friends with a girl named Tynesha. Her boyfriend and Big Lurch had spent the evening of April 10th, 2002, smoking PCP together. You might know this drug better by the name Angel Dust. Later that night, a tragedy happened. Big Lurch was alone with Tynesha and high on PCP when he stabbed her in the back. A 3-inch knife blade was found broken off under her shoulder blade. It's not clear exactly what happened. Big Lurch never gave a very clear testimony. However, we do know that her body was found by her friend, who opened the door to what looked like a scene from a horror movie. Her chest had been ripped open, she had bite marks all over her face, and her lungs had been pulled out of her body. It didn't take too long to work out who done that to Tynesha. Big Lurch was soon found in the middle of the street, completely naked, covered in blood, and screaming at the sky. That was when the police picked him up, but they were discovering more about the gruesome murder as they brought him in. There weren't only bite marks on Tynesha's face, but there were chunks bitten out of her lungs too. A medical examination was quickly performed on Big Lurch. It proved there was human flesh in his stomach that wasn't his own. There was no doubt about who the murderer was. Big Lurch's lawyers claimed he was not guilty by reason of insanity because he was high when the murder took place. But the courts disagreed. He was convicted and sentenced to life in prison.
Damn, yo.
But that's not quite where the story ends. Tynesha's mother thinks more justice is needed. She filed a lawsuit against Big Lurch's record label. Sounds weird, right? She claims her daughter is dead because the record label was encouraging Big Lurch to smoke PCP, a drug known for turning people violent. According to the lawsuit, they suspect that the record label did this because gangster rap artists like Big Lurch are easier to market if they're constantly involved with violent activities. We'll never know if that's true or not, but something about it sure seems to make sense, especially since Big Lurch didn't seem that violent before this tragedy happened. You'll have to decide for yourself if you agree with Tynesha's mom or not. Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Did you like this video? Then make sure you check out this one.
Okay, Team Pixel, I see you. Who else wanna run? Ain't no mechanic coming all the way out here. I gotta get to this game. What's up, man?
Where you at? Are you gonna make it to the game?
I mean, if you send the chopper?
At Chopper?
Yeah.
Bro, where you at?
Where am I at?
Come on, man.
Is that Drewski?
Hey, Drewski, do you need some help?
Yeah, if y'all watching the game. Yo, let's take a selfie. You gotta know when to hold 'em and when to fold 'em.
I hope everybody like, comment, share, and subscribe. And we out this bitch.